All right, so we're gonna get started. How's everybody doing today? Good? So just make sure you guys are in the right room. You're in the who's responsible, the vendor, or the DBA session. And we'll do some introductions. I forget who you put first in the slides, Erin, but I'm Mike Walsh. I represent the DBA side of the house. I work for myself now. That's my logo up there. I run the Seacoast SQL Server Users Group, and I blog, I tweet. I'm an MVP, and that's me.
I'm Erin Stellato. I represent the vendors.
Boo!
I also blog at the SQL, which is actually erinstellato.com, and I'm on Twitter. I do some volunteer work for PASS, and I work for Highland Software, which is a software company. We create ECM software, and my title is Database Engineer. And I like to say engineer because I engineer solutions. Right? I'm not actually a database administrator. I'm not responsible for any databases. It's kind of nice. I am sort of on call, right, for when customers have issues. Sometimes I get pulled into those. And primarily, our group is responsible for issues that come in via technical support. So people are having problems with the system in some way, or they've done something not so smart and created some bad data in their system, and they need some help fixing it. That's maybe 30 to 40% of our work. The other 50, 60%, 70% is services, where customers are engaging with us to write reports for them, to do some performance tuning, because that's really not their area of expertise. They want to migrate. We actually support multiple platforms, Oracle, including SQL Server, Sybase. One customer left on Informix. So sometimes they want to migrate. We get involved with that as well. And when I really got involved in the SQL community about a year and a half ago, I noticed, and I got on Twitter, I noticed a lot of comments related to vendors. And I was kind of surprised because I thought that, I didn't understand actually that there was such a problem. We're very customer service oriented at my company. And I feel like we really do a lot for our customers. And so I was a little bit confused, and I actually wrote an abstract, which I submitted to PASS last year for the summit. Was not accepted, which was actually probably a good thing. And somewhere along the way, I encountered this blog post that Mike had written about interview questions for a vendor. And it was really interesting. And so when we got to PASS last year, I found myself at dinner with Mike one night, and we started talking about vendors and DBAs and came up with the idea for this presentation.
Your life was never the same after you met me, right?
No, it has not been the same since.
She meant that in a positive way. It didn't sound like it, but she did.
Right, right. So we got to talking about this, submitted it. Actually, we did this presentation in Cleveland way back in February, which is where I'm from. Mike was kind enough to come out. And when we started talking about this, we had a problem kind of figuring out where we were going to start.
You're going to start.
Right.
I
am going to start. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about what my goals were first. You're right. Which was the whole purpose for why we created this presentation. For me, it's really important to develop good relationships with our customers. And again, this may sound foreign to you, but honestly, I have a lot of great customers that I work with on a regular basis, and I really enjoy getting to know them, getting to know how their solution works. Can you click for me? One more?
Put them all on, okay.
Understand how their solution works, and then also use them as references going forward when I'm working with other customers. And I want to know what their solution looks like. Are they using HA? Do they have DR in place? Amazingly, a lot of them do not. How do they do their maintenance strategies? So these were really the reasons that I kind of wanted to pull this together.
And I just wanted to show Erin that vendors are bad. No.
Yeah, right.
Actually, this is going to be an interactive session, by the way. So
that's why we're walking around, because
yeah.
I'm not one to stand very still.
We're giving away a copy of the Deep Dives 2 book. I was a tech editor, so I got a free copy, and we'll give this one away. It's not signed yet, because I didn't know who was going to win it. That would have been rigged if I did, I guess, right? But there's another signing on Friday, so you can go get it signed and walk through the line if you like. So before I go to my goals, I wanted to see how many people in here are DBAs. And then I worked the room and talked beforehand, so it's rigged against you. How many people are software vendors? And that's good. And you admit it. So no, I'm joking. I have a lot of. Erin's a good software vendor. Her company is. Yeah, you can be. You definitely can be. How many people in here, the DBAs, have had a bad experience with a software vendor? So, Erin, you're surprised by that because you thought that I was. You thought that it was just overblown on Twitter, right?
I kind of thought you were full of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I may be, but not in this regard.
Do you have bad experiences with every vendor? No.
No.
All right. It's
And I
just
never
some
said that.
vendors.
Yeah, most or some? Most.
People who do our cleaning in our office are really good.
Yeah. All right. So most software vendors, raise your hand.
Most.
Some software vendors, raise your hand. All right. So it's 50-50.
Okay.
Can we change it to are having a bad experience with the vendor right now?
How many people are currently having a bad experience with a software vendor right now?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, for you vendors, how many people have bad experiences with customer DBA sometimes?
Sometimes.
Well, did I editorialized my question, I guess.
You did. It's all right.
But what do I want? I've been a DBA for 12 years. I'm off my own now, so I'm not a DBA directly. But when I've been a DBA, I want to have an easier job. I want to be able to go on vacation and enjoy it. I want to be able to deploy. You have a question?
Do you also include an outsourced project that is software-friendly?
Well, we don't like to insult consultants in this room. So no, we don't. No, we can include them. Absolutely.
We don't need to include any names. Right?
Yeah, we'll be asking you for stories as we go. You don't need to mention names. You can tell me afterwards, though. I'll send on Twitter for you anonymously. Yeah. So, do you have an experience you want to ask about, or?
No, I'm working also with software vendors and also with outsourced projects.
Okay.
We tell them what we expect them to do, but also get different take on it. And that's
Sure.
we need to review and revise and
Oh, yeah.
reject and all of that.
So for the DVD, the question was, is this about working with outsourced providers as well? And it is. So it's the same. I think this principles apply. It's not intended for that, but I think the principles we talk about apply to. Well, they can even apply to marriage. I think. But as we go, you'll see. So we're giving you marriage counseling as well, or premarital counseling. So I want to have better knowledge as a DBA. I want DBAs to have better knowledge of what third-party applications do and what they have to do. So when an application comes in, I want to know what I need to do to support it. I want to know. I have a lot of questions. Can I do this maintenance? Can I do that? And I want to have that ahead of time. And I want to make informed decisions. I'm a DBA, so it sounds corny, but I think when I've been in DBA, I've been under the impression that I'm the only one in the company that cares about the data. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe the developers really they love the data, and the vendors love the data, and management supports me and all that. But I still operate like I'm the only one that cares about the data, like I'm the data advocate. And if you're a DBA, you really should be that data advocate. And Erin, I'll let you have the clicker because she likes definitions, and she wants to give some definitions.
I do, and I make the presentation
She
prettier.
she likes animations,
But it's not working.
but it's not working.
It doesn't like me. I can get up here.
I don't know what vendor made this.
Then everybody can see me, because they couldn't before.
Technical difficulties.
So I want to take a minute to define vendor, which I know that I said that I work for a software company, but when I meet people here, especially this week so far, when I introduce myself and I say that I work for a vendor, very often one of the things that they look at me and then one of the first thoughts is that Quest, is that Confio, is it SQL Century, right? Is it somebody who's in the vendor expo? So when I say vendor, that is not specifically who I'm speaking of, right? I'm talking about a company that creates software, sells it to other companies. And the customer then being the company that purchases that software, runs it in-house. And I also want to differentiate between required and recommended, because I think it's very important, right? It's really necessary to understand what is it that I have to do, that I absolutely have to have in place for that software to work and for me to remain supported, versus what does the vendor recommend that I do, right? I don't have to do it, but they recommend that I do it for some particular reason. I think it's really important to differentiate between the two of them.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is where I was going earlier, which was where do we begin, right? Because there's a lot of stuff we could talk about. And this is kind of how we felt initially.
This is not from either one of our houses, just so our spouses don't get mad.
Right. Exactly.
Looks like the kids' playroom, but it's not.
So we decided to start with installation.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
We decided to talk before the installation. How many DBAs? Sorry, Erin.
That's okay.
How many DBAs get involved like this? You're sitting in your cube. We'll pick on Mike because I know you. Hey, this application we installed last week is all these problems. It's busted. Can you go fix it? How many people get involved to an application and get invited into a mess like that after the fact? Yeah. How many people say, okay, hey, there's a new application coming. I'll pick on Eric this time. There's a new application coming. We're going to be looking to do something with document management. I'm not picking on your company. That's just what came to mind.
It's okay.
And we want to have you review some of the vendors and discuss which one's right. Does anybody have that conversation at the company? Sometimes you can. Isn't it great when you have that conversation? I mean, it's a whole different experience, right? So this is my little query about that. I like to insert DBA into process where project idea equals 1. Now, this isn't really a vendor problem. This isn't, so I'm not picking on you. This is actually something that we do wrong and maybe our companies do wrong. We don't get involved. There's different ways to get involved. I used to be shy. I'm not shy anymore. And midpoint in my career, I stopped being shy. And when I was no longer shy, I would walk around. I was working for a large insurance company in New Hampshire. And if I heard somebody talking about SQL Server, I was the primary SQL DBA, the only actually at that time. And if I heard them talking in a meeting or I knew they were talking about it, I'd sort of just, I'd invite myself in. And I'd come into the meeting and I'd say, hey, you guys are talking about SQL. Do you want to talk to the SQL DBA too? And people are too awkward to say no. So I sat in a meeting and got involved. But once you get involved, what do you do? You know, so now you're involved. What do you do? I mean, hey, Erin, no, okay, great, you're our vendor. How you doing?
I'm great, Mike. How are you?
Was it fun? You know,
it was awesome.
So you have to have a vendor interview, and this is Erin picked this slide.
Right. That's my conversation with Mike.
Yeah.
Don't I look happy?
Don Gabor would probably say it's bad body language here, I think, but I had a different slide before, but Pat made me take it out because I like to consider my vendor interview an interrogation.
It was a little violent.
Yeah, it wasn't that violent. It was
inappropriate.
It was inappropriate, probably, but it was an interrogation of sorts. Nobody got hurt during it. But anyway, we have to have a vendor interview, I think, and it's really a conversation. It's asking questions. But what kind of questions do we ask? So this is where the whole interaction comes in. So we have a list of questions, and I actually have a blog post with the questions. That's what Erin was talking about. These slides will all be available at the end, by the way, and we'll have the questions. But what do you guys think of? So what kind of questions should we be asking vendors? Just shout them out. Don't raise your hand. I'll find you in my ears. Eric.
What are the requirements?
Sure.
That's pretty vague.
Yes.
What version?
What version of SQL? Absolutely. Any other questions? Capacity? Yep. Architecture?
What permissions are you going to need?
Maybe we should do hands.
Okay.
Permissions, yeah.
But capacity. Capacity? What do you mean capacity?
Let's zoom in.
I'll give you a more specific question.
That's what I want.
How much space for in our environment, usually when I'm in this relationship or this discussion,
Yep.
they already know how large our environment is. How large do you expect that database to get over the next 12 months? Because that's the number I have to supply the sand guy.
Excellent.
Do you like that question?
I love that
Do
question.
you get that question a lot from us?
I do.
You do? Oh, good.
do.
All right.
You know, I usually don't know.
And you know, do we have a microphone in here, by
Do
the
you
way?
usually get that I don't know?
We don't.
That's what I usually get.
It is an it depends answer, right? Especially in our environment. There's some other information that I need from you, which you may not know, which you may have to go back to the business to find out. But I need that to give you a good answer. Otherwise, I'm just making something up.
And I'm gonna start copying you guys, by the way, because I keep forgetting there's a DVD.
Oh, right.
So I'm not being a parrot, but
Okay.
It's
okay.
Which SQL license?
which SQL license?
Which SQL license, right? Do I have
Yeah.
to have standard edition? Do I have to have enterprise edition?
Sure.
Okay.
In the back. Oops.
I'm going to assume at this point that you've already filtered out all the different vendors based on your requirements and that's what you might actually need the software to do. Is that correct?
That's a good
Yeah.
question.
So the assumption by this point is we've already determined that this software does what we need. Yeah. So that at this point, hopefully you've done that, or a few levels ahead of you have done that. Yep.
I mean, it might even be where you've purchased the software.
Yeah.
It may be pre-sales, right?
Yeah.
But it might be where we've already purchased it. We know this is what we're going with. Now we need to get ready to get it installed,
Yep.
right?
What kind of maintenance?
What kind of maintenance you need? Absolutely. That's a great one. We'll talk about that a lot later too.
When I mentioned architecture, I was talking along the lines of you require dedicated hardware.
Sure.
Great.
The application, is it separated into different tiers, or you have UI separate from database?
Sure. So the application, you're talking about the application architecture, and can it support multi-instance? Does it have to be on its own instance? Where does this?
Will tell us or has told us it has to be dedicated.
Sure.
Right. So my question back to that is why? Okay. So his point is that every vendor so far that you've worked with has said it has to be a dedicated instance. And I will say it does not have to be a dedicated instance. That's not a requirement, right? It's a recommendation.
They make a requirement for support in some cases.
Okay. So if it's made a requirement for support, do they give you reasons for why? Okay, and
They don't.
and it's my recommendation that it's fair for you to ask why. Because I tell you why I recommend it, right? There's some
Sure, yes.
instance level settings that we recommend based on how our application performs where that might not be appropriate for other databases. One is that we recommend you disable parallelism. It's a long story. We've done some testing. There's some reason behind that. But there are other databases that definitely benefit
Sure.
from parallelism, right? So maybe you don't want to put them on the same instance.
Yeah, so that's kind of the questions that, this is just this is not the exhaustive list, and the blog posts that we link to for my blog posts and Erin's, those aren't exhaustive lists either. I actually use this vendor interview process more as a conversation. I have a list of questions, and I'll start asking the questions, and based on an answer, I may go in a totally different direction. So, okay, well, now I know I need to zoom in here because you guys don't understand security, or wow, you want me to deploy it on this huge scale-out model, and we have 4 users. But these are, hardware specifications required versus recommended, like Erin said. Is it dedicated? What edition? What version? But so that's it, right? Now we've got our questions. We go and start doing the installation.
Yeah.
Or not. Wait, that's right. Erin changed the slides on us again. What about a customer? And she wants to be able to ask us questions too.
Right. You don't get away with
that's
just
fine.
being done. So where is the customer's DBA in this process? Sometimes I am not, and very often, unfortunately, I'm not involved in that whole pre-sales process. I think I do walk around the office and I kind of jump into a conversation when I hear SQL Server being discussed or Oracle or something like that. But I'm actually very separate from the sales area. It would be really interesting, I think, for me to spend some time in the sales area and see how much database conversation comes up. It's very valid if you are involved in that process to ask where the customer's DBA is. And I think it's also a really good idea to have a customer interview and develop those kinds of questions as well. So I have some of them, but before I go through them, Jerry, do you guys, and I'm picking on Jerry because I know he's a vendor. Do you get involved in this?
I wish I did. No, I mean, it's basically questions. We do a lot of performance testing. We test up to the level of, or beyond the level of the biggest customer we will have on a given release. So that's kind of our interaction is, okay, so who are the customers for this release? Who are the people that are coming in? What databases will they be on? And what will their volume be? And is there anything in particular we need to know about that? But we don't get a chance to talk to the customer directly in general.
Okay.
So you don't talk to the customer much. You try and just make sure you hit all the worst cases and
Most complicated, high-performing cases.
Yep.
So have any of you ever spoken with the vendor and sort of had them interview you or had them maybe understand your solution from the database perspective?
That's what I'm talking about. No, let the record
Not at
show
all.
no hands gone up. Oh, one hand went up. Go ahead, Joe.
My experience seems to suggest that the vendors actually don't want the DBA involved because we will ask hard questions.
So
And that will short-circuit the sales process.
just repeat what Joe said. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
If you're going to run SSA on my server, I
Yep.
want to know, why do you recommend running shrink maybe once a week?
Sure.
I want to know, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And that, puts the spotlight on, maybe some of the darker areas of the software.
Sure. So you think then, just repeat your thought. Basically, the vendors are afraid of getting challenging questions in your mind, and they may not want to have their approach challenged. Sure. I've seen that with some vendors. I'm not picking on you, but I've seen that with some vendors.
So every time I speak to a DBA for the first time, to a customer DBA, I basically do interview them. It's not obvious, right? I'm not telling them that's exactly what I'm doing, but I have to understand their knowledge level, and I have to understand where they're coming from so that I can talk on the right level. Because we have 10,000 customers. So not all of them have full-time DBAs. A lot of them are accidental DBAs, right, or involuntary DBAs. They're actually administering the application, and they have to take care of the database as a result. So I start out with, how many databases do you administer? And that's a big one for me. Is it 1, right, or is it 500? That tells me a lot right there. And then I start talking, what are your strategies for these other databases? Are you doing anything for HADR? And it actually doesn't take too long for me to sort of start to understand where they are. Some other things that I talk about or ask about is the environment. If they have a test environment, right, because everybody has a test environment. And is there a change order process? It's good for me to know. So I have more of these, again, on the blog, on my blog.
Do you find a lot of customers? I never thought this when we've rehearsed this. Do you have customers that have test environments? Because a lot of who in here has test environments for a lot of their they're third-party applications, not your own in-house applications, but what I call your out-house applications, for lack of a better term.
Note that I'm shaking my head.
And
Okay.
is that functional or product or performance or both?
Testing upgrades,
Yeah.
you know, all sorts of stuff.
So you guys have multiple testing environments. Some of you performance testing. I know you guys do. I work with you guys, but performance, release testing, QA, and yeah.
I would say that probably less than half of our customers have test
Yeah.
environments.
I know a lot of companies I help with that have smaller environments, and they have small little third-party apps. They don't have, they don't have a test environment for them. That seems to be common with the small shops I go into that have, this little departmental app.
Go.
So it's okay.
Can I comment a little bit?
Yes.
Go ahead, yeah.
There's a lot of cases, like, when I take over, like,
Yep.
I started a new job and I took over managing the vendor apps, and it was managed by accident or DBA, so when you do the interview, you kind of, okay, the person that managing this doesn't have the skill set.
Sure.
And then I took over and I start questioning the vendor for certain things, like, what do you do to see that? And the same questions, and I don't get the response, like, because they're like, well, who are you? And I think more of the communication, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to get your take on it. How do you handle that with suddenly your customer that, have a change, like these different DBAs in charge? How do you handle it as a vendor?
I'm fine with that, actually. I would love to hear from more of the DBAs that exist for our customers, because I don't get any interaction with them unless usually there's a problem or unless they're a very proactive DBA and make it a point to ask me questions. But in that case, if I had a customer that was maybe struggling that needed, I can think of one that comes to mind right now. They have a 160 gig database, which to me is a sizable database, which to me needs a real DBA to manage it. It's a 24/7 environment, and they don't have a real DBA. Their person is the admin for our application, and knows a little bit about SQL Server. But if there's a true failure, she's calling me first. So if they showed up with a new DBA, I would love to talk to that person. Now, there's some other things I'd want them to do, which we'll get to, but I would be happy to take those questions.
My vendor is not.
Your vendor's not okay to get those questions? Yeah.
No.
So do you ask why?
Well,
Like, how much do you push?
I did,
You do push? Yeah.
Yeah.
For me personally.
Right.
I pushed that. And then I finally I asked for a different support. I asked for their lead, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to push it that far.
Yes.
And I end up talking to their lead and they get that sorted out. And I know their code changed, a little bit.
Right. So Yanni's point is that she continued to push back, right? And she went sort of up the chain. And in the end, it resulted in a code change. How many of you have done that? Okay. How many of you consider that an option, right? If you didn't raise your hand, do you think that's an option for you? Because I would tell you that it is, right? If you don't get the response, I would say don't let it drop, because the problem's just going to perpetuate, and there's going to be another DB out there who's mad, right, who's going to say something on Twitter about some lousy vendor, and it's not going to get any better. I think that sometimes you have to sort of drive that to a solution. And from hang on, Meryl, from my perspective, I have to do the same thing, or I think I have the same responsibility back to the customer. If I'm working with a customer who isn't doing much with their database, or who maybe isn't backing it up with the strategy that I really think they should, I've been known to go contact their account manager on our side and say, look, I don't think this person's doing what they need to do. I kind of think their solution's at risk. Can you get in touch with somebody on your side? Because I think I have a responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
Meryl had a question.
My favorite and most frustrating place, though, is when you get through and vendors as well, that's a problem, but it really wouldn't be cost effective.
Aha.
Yeah.
So Meryl's point is that he's had discussions where they say, that is a problem, I agree with you, but it's not going to be cost effective for us to do anything about it. And I sympathize with that. I actually struggle myself with that argument. And I've had that same discussion with our developers, right? Where I'll go and I'll say, look, this is something we really need to do. I really want to see us I really want to see us do this in the software. And I've been told no. And what I've been told is, it's not enough of a pain for you, for me to make that change yet because of all the work that's involved. So I understand that. And from their perspective, when you have 10,000 customers, right? When you have 20,000 customers, when you're Microsoft, when you're introducing change, there's risk.
Yeah.
Right? There's always some amount of risk involved. And can you manage that risk?
And that happens with SQL Server right now, right? I mean, there are features that we've all wanted and that many people in the community have clamored for that are just not coming in because the cost to unwind some of them and change them and the impact is too great, and so it keeps getting pushed or ignored, maybe is a strong word, but
It doesn't kind of get out of jail free.
it can be used that way, yeah, as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Yep.
Yeah, and hopefully it is. I mean, hopefully you can find a solution.
But then, sometimes I'm like, wow.
Right. And I still think you can challenge that. I mean, you have multiple avenues, I think, to do that, right? Not just you as the DBA, right? But there are other people within your organization who interact with that vendor,
Yep.
I assume, right? I assume you're not the only one. You've got multiple channels to take advantage of there. And so use them, right? Know who those people are on your team, right? And leverage that. Yes, sir.
I think a lot of times the business unit is closer to being on the vendor side than on the tech side.
I would agree. The business unit is closer to the
And not
vendor
as
usually
much
than the
of an
technical.
advocate for what you want, what you think is right,
Yeah.
as what the vendor thinks is
Sure.
True.
Well, they bought the software.
The people who have the money,
Yeah.
they don't think it's cost effective either because it's not affecting them, it's affecting me, making my job harder, but their job is the same.
So let me turn that back. Actually, I'm going to take your side for a second, or take the business unit side.
Get out.
What you guys are kind of getting at basically is even your business unit that bought that app, they don't want to listen to you because it doesn't affect them. I mean, we can try, and as DBAs, we can try and paint that picture. And we have some slides talking about communication. That's the whole part I was telling about, that this is good for marriages too. But we need to be able to communicate why it's an issue. So, if it's, I was talking to somebody before the presentation started, not to pick on you, Russell, but talking about indexes of a vendor. And this vendor has no indexes on their application whatsoever. They've added the indexes, and the vendor says, nope, you can't do that. Undo them, please. It's going to invalidate your support contract. They removed them, and they're not going to add them. It's just, they said, okay, too bad. So that's something that, your business users aren't directly impacted by that, but they are, right? Because their performance is bad. I mean, you were obviously looking for a reason. You don't just go and look at your, sometimes I do if I'm feeling negative. I'll go and look at their application, see what they're doing.
You're having a bad day, Mike.
Yeah, if I want to pick on a vendor, but you weren't just looking to find missing indexes. You were dealing with a performance problem. So, the answer is they can save money because now they can do, whatever widget they're building through that application, they can do it faster now. Maybe they have to get rid of one person now because they don't have to, not that we want our companies to be getting rid of a person, but they can be more effective. They can put them someplace else.
Actually,
they can promote somebody.
if you can tie it back to money in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form,
That's what I'm getting
right?
at, yeah.
There you have a lot more. If you can turn it to ROI, right? So how long are your users waiting? Is
Yep.
it 10 seconds every time, right?
Yep.
And if you add that up across the day, and then you put a dollar amount with that, that becomes a lot more powerful when you're dealing with that kind of a problem than just saying, oh, Sally's ticked off because it's taking
Absolutely, yeah.
10 seconds for this query to run.
Yeah. I see a hand behind Meryl, so go ahead.
Going back to the pushback,
Yep.
I work in an environment where products are already bought, COTS, and when I push back because they have already been installed and they have certain access to the database, and I apply our security to it and it breaks them, then I'm the bad guy because I applied the security that we have on every server in our environment.
Yeah.
That we told them that you can't do this
Mm-hmm.
before
Yeah.
the fact. What kind of access do you need? They're not completely honest with us
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
because it runs in everybody else's environment, and
Yeah.
they let us do that.
Okay.
So,
But then when I push back and say, well, I'm not changing anything, security's got to let you know or give the okay, and then I'll undo it. Well, now all you got to do is this.
it's a few slides away.
I'm not going to
Right.
do that.
Hold that thought. We're going to
Yeah.
come back to security.
We actually talk about security and an approach there.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it is. No, it's a huge one. Who in here has easy security with their vendors, and everything goes swimmingly, or with your DBAs, right? So, that's a big difficulty. But for the actual installation,
Right. Now, so it's interesting that you would get that database installed without, were you involved in that installation?
I was sitting there, and what they have is the GUI where it installs through an interface.
Uh-huh.
Installs the application and database all at one time.
Okay.
And when they come to me for that, on two separate ways, actually, I want to see the code behind it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have it. Well, you have to
There's code behind it someplace. Yep.
Before it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And on one chance they did. On the second one, the guy that came out to install it never came back again because I basically, I don't know what happened to him, but everything he did was a challenge on it. And he had no idea. He was on the phone calling his support every single time I asked him. And I don't know whether they got rid of him or sent him somewhere else. But
Right, that's unfortunate. So part of our installation is that if you buy directly from us, we come out, we have a team, an installer and project manager, depending on how big the solution is, that comes out and does that installation. My team actually does training for the installers to get them to understand what the database requires, what the recommendations are for us. They do their best to set up maintenance plans if there's no DBA. Or if there's a DBA, they give them our guides, which we'll talk about and have that discussion with them. We typically don't install SQL Server. And I'm hoping that in your environment, you're the one that's installing SQL Server as well.
Sounds like AJ, maybe not, though.
I install the server,
Okay.
but they're doing the database.
Then they do all the rest.
Right. So, I've had customers ask the same thing, right? When we go to create the database, they want to see that code. And I can't give them that code directly because it's all encapsulated within an application. But I will say you can run Profiler. Right? You can run Profiler while I run that utility, and you can capture everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, but that's while it's being installed. I want to see it before it gets
You have a test environment, don't you?
yeah,
So it's all in the test environment first.
but it's still being installed in our environment.
It is, but you can blow that away. You can blow that away.
Right, but there's
Right.
no reason why you can't provide that code ahead of time, too.
I could. If you really pushed me on it, I could.
We put, I mean, our stuff is written in Java, and we base our, basically, it's highly customizable, so we build a DDL based on your configuration, and we execute it for Java. We're not creating scripts, but the update, the instantiation of the database and the database upload is all instrumented, so you can get a download that will show you all the SQL that was executed and how long it took. But there's no way to say, okay, if I were to imagine I'm installing it to spit this stuff out. That's just not how it works. That's not how we would build modern software.
Yep.
Because every customer environment is different.
But you know what tables you're creating, what permissions are needed, and what access you're needing.
We document the permissions, but for the tables, for example, and I think it's, Erin was telling me the same with them, it's highly configurable. So you can add your own, the business can add their own tables, can add foreign keys from our tables to the new tables, can do all kinds of stuff. So we don't know that, that's all through the configuration file, and what gets generated is based off of that. So really, this isn't having a big say in what's going on.
Sure.
One more.
One more question, Merrill. Go ahead.
The little setup thing, though, is always a pain point.
The setup thing is always a pain point?
Yeah, we buy all of our software, essentially. And, typically an SE comes out, they have some, pardon me, but tacky, crappy little executable installer. They don't know what it's for. They just say, I need SA, and I need to run this on your database server.
Yep.
And I say, I have a failover cluster. I'm not keen to let you do that. And they say, what's a failover cluster? And then I say, and you really can't have SA, so find out how to configure that.
Yep.
Right.
With a different account. Please, Windows authentication.
Yeah, well,
Right. And I think, again, I do think that's fair.
Yep.
In their defense, in the defense of the SE, they're an SE, right? They're not a database admin. They don't know what a cluster is. I mean, I hear them say those words, and I can just see the look of fear on their face, right? And they're like, I don't know what a cluster is. I'm like, it's okay. We'll talk you through it, right? So there's definitely education, I think, that should be happening on the vendor side as
Yep.
well.
yeah.
All right, so security, hot topic.
Yeah, so we all know what vendors look like, right? Erin has her hair down. Oh, she has it out a little
Yeah.
bit, but
Right.
she left her mask at home. But this is what vendors look like, right? That's what we think they look like sometimes. Who doesn't think their vendors
You're
look like
lucky
that
that I didn't
sometimes?
change that slide deck and put a picture of me in there.
So I don't mean this in a bad way, but we think our vendors when they're hurt our environment. So Merrill, what industry do you work in? Can I say?
Yes.
Merrill works for a bank, and his question before was, why do you have SA on my big cluster? Has everything else on it? And that's a perfectly fair question because that's our fear that who is this vendor coming in that we don't know that wants to have access to our environment. So kind of real quick here, I'm not going to tell you how to do security. This is not a presentation on security, but before we get there, we'll tell a story. So
Your story first.
all right. So I was working for a software company, or actually not a software company, it was a health insurance company. They happened to make software as well. I almost let that slip that I made software once. But they did. But their main business was data analysis for health insurance data. And we were getting a new building security vendor, the company that comes in and puts our door access cards in, the little proximity cards. And I was sitting down. This is the company where I was kind of the turning point in my life where I was more vocal and got involved. So I was involved early in this phase. They had already bought the software, but I got involved in the very first, here's what we're going to do, discussion meetings with the systems engineer. And I asked him, how do you guys secure your environment? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, how do you guys talk to SQL? And he said, well, we use SA, and we use a blank password. And this was SQL Server 2005, back when this happened. And I looked across from them. I remember the conference room. I can still picture there's a few of us in there. And I looked across and I said, wait a second, that's not the default. You have to. He goes, yeah, I know that's a pain. I said, well, yeah, it's supposed to be a pain. You shouldn't be using a blank SA password for the system that's, my back at the time was to the door too. So, so just and they didn't get it. They just didn't understand. We ended up compromising and working on a solution. But had I not asked that question, well, it wouldn't have happened because we're putting on a shared cluster. But had that not happened, that means that vendor. If I told you who it was, you can go to any of their environments right now, at least installed by this install team, and you probably find you can log in really easily. And so that's how bad vendors can be. I mean, us DBAs make mistakes sometimes too.
Right, and again, keep in mind that I'm working with a lot of accidental or involuntary DBAs. So I've had customers who've called and DBAs who've said, well, what do I need to set my SA password to? And I'm like, really? And so I kind of explain about security. I've also had them just set it to the same password that we use for a login in our application, right? So they make it the same. I also have DBAs that are quite happy to let me connect to their environment and walk away. They log in with their Windows credentials, right? Or they log in with SA.
Domain admin.
Or they have no idea what they are, right? Yeah, administrator. I get in as administrator all the time. And then they're like, okay, you're in. Do you need me to do anything? And I'm like, well, just don't lock the machine on me. And they'll get off the phone, and there I am in their environment. So I have a lot of access to customer data.
Yeah. Just thought occurred to me we were talking that, maybe those of us who care to come to these presentations, and who are DBAs who protect our environments, maybe we need to be the vocal ones because maybe the DBAs who, I'm not saying your software has a problem, maybe, Merrill's company, maybe 99% of the time, like that building security system, that was new to them. And they weren't a new company. Maybe we need to be more vocal and get it out there to them. I don't mean go to Twitter and slam a company. That's not really my style. But be vocal and say, this is why it's a problem. Maybe it's a side job for you too, if they want to help you help them. Question?
I was going to ask Erin, when you have that kind of access, do you really want the risk for it to have that access in their environment? I would think if I were in your shoes, I wouldn't want that access because if something went wrong.
Right. So the question is. Right. So the question is, do I want that level of responsibility? It makes my job easier, right? Because I can get exactly what I need. And it's funny because I'm so used to that, because I have so many customers that give me that access, that when I get not a difficult DBA, I almost said that, when I get a DBA who's doing it right, I'm annoyed.
Somebody tweet that?
I'm like, man, I don't have access to the DMVs. I can't do this, right? So then I have to go back and ask for that. I don't look for that responsibility, but I have it. It's a fact. I have had it from the beginning, and I take it very, very seriously. It's something that I've really tried to instill in our team. We have, proximity cards and all of that, and we have badges, and we created a list kind of things that we do whenever we connect to a customer environment to make sure that we're always protecting their data. Because if I'm fixing a problem, if I'm deleting data, if I'm updating data, I'm completely and solely responsible for that. And so at that point, I am a DBA, right? And I get that. So.
That's good. That's the exception, I think, to a lot of the vendors that I deal with, unfortunately. So why? Again, I'm not Brian Kelly, so I'm not going to give you a presentation on excruciating details and security. But real quick, why should we care about security as DBAs? Well, number one, we want to be auditable. Right? Our environments, especially, I saw a lot of people in insurance companies and banks and for government in here, walk around the room beforehand. We're in industries that have auditability requirements. We have to be able to prove who logged in, when they logged in, what they did, and how long they're in for. If we just log in Erin to our machine as domain admin and walk away and go have lunch, we can't prove that she didn't do anything bad. She's a nice person. She probably wouldn't, but you never know.
And I suppose that for my own
vendor.
concerns, I should be asking for a different login, right? So
that's a
it can
good
be
point.
logged.
Maybe just made Erin change, actually, by that question. We're the ones that have to fix it, you know. So I know that's a weird way to think about it, but that's my main reason why I care about security is because the tighter the environment is, the less calls I get. It's that simple. Who knows what DBA stands for? I think we all know.
Don't bother.
No, that's if you're a developer. If you're a developer,
Not
DBA
don't
stands for
bother
don't
us.
bother asking. Who knows the other default blame acceptor, right? So if something goes wrong, they call you. They're in your queue. The CIO says, you know, this new application that just got installed magically last week failed, and it's your fault. Fix it. Like, well, I don't even know what the problem is. I don't even know what this application is or what server it's on, but it's your fault because it came into your environment magically. And I think a good DBA should have a slight bit of healthy paranoid control freak in them. You know, maybe healthy. I don't know if you can make that healthy, but if you can, that's what you should do. You know, how do I like to do security? I like to do, you know, again, real simple, least privilege. You get the permission to do what you need. You know, it doesn't mean nobody needs SA. You know, a couple people need SA level rights, the DBAs. And even then, not all the DBAs do. Maybe the production DBAs and not the development DBAs. I can't control the vendor application directly, but I don't even want to see, you know, Erin's application. I don't even want to see your application users having DBO. Because in my mind, there's two reasons for that. Number one, it's a risk because, you know, if your application were a banking system, that means that now that's another black hole where something bad can happen to the application. It also means that your developers aren't paying attention to best practices. You guys don't use DBO, right? You guys do role-based security?
We have role-based, yes.
Good. I like to go group-based, so I really like Windows authentication. It's much better, it's much safer than SQL. If you have to do SQL, you know, it's okay. But I love using groups for the users that connect. You know, just if you can do that, I think a good DBA should be lazy too, not just paranoid control freak, but a little lazy. Somebody once said it's efficient, but I say lazy. Because when I tried to tell my wife I was efficient, she didn't buy it. So, you know, in the role-based, I like to see vendors use roles. And I can't go and make a new vendor use roles, but if they do, that's great because they actually assign the permissions to the roles. I can look at them. I don't have to worry about ever changing permissions when they do a release. It's cleaner. Going back to the question AJ asked earlier, it's easier for me to read a document and read the code and see all the permissions assigned that way. You know, and this is kind of the question that you were asking about before, a couple people about security. I call it the 4 C's and 1 K of security, or bridging the gap. And this really applies to everything we do. We need to communicate. So, you know, the question that you guys are asking us, ask your vendors those same questions, and have the conversations with them. And don't just communicate, you know, in a one-way. Communication is not a one-way yelling, right? It's having a conversation and listening actively and trying to work together. You need to collaborate. So, you know, I think some of us on the DBA side don't collaborate. We just say, how come you're not doing this? This is pathetic. Get me to your manager. But let's collaborate and try and work it out. And sometimes we have to compromise. You know, sometimes on the DBA side, we have to say, okay, you know what? That building security system, I said, fine. You guys can have DBO rights. I'll give you guys DB Creator and Security Admin because their tool made their own user. I'll watch your tool run. I'll take away permissions down to just DBO. Your DBO of your own database, please try and change that in a future release. And they said, oh, yeah, we definitely will. I don't think they did, but that was my compromise. You know, have you ever had a compromise?
I have. And this is where, as a DBA, if you can get involved early, I think you can have a lot of power, right, and use your power for good, not for evil.
You mean early, like before you guys have our money?
Early before you have the money.
Yeah.
I know that some of you can get involved at that stage, but we worked with a customer who was in the healthcare industry, and I got pulled in. I got an email from sales, and it's a panicky email because it's getting to the close of the quarter, right? So they're trying to finish the sale before the close of the quarter, and the DBA has questions about security and about how we're doing something within our application. So I get on the call, and I can tell immediately within about 2 minutes that it's a very knowledgeable DBA. And their concern was the rights that one of our logins had, and it didn't fit within their security policy. And he was very clear. He was very willing to explain to me why that did not adhere to their security policy. So then we had to escalate that up because I was saying, I can't do anything. I can't give you an alternative, right, which is the first thing that I try to do. Well, even though this is what we recommend, you can do this instead, right? I didn't have that option that would fit within their security policy. And so I had to escalate it all the way up to development. And it got to the point where he was stating, you cannot do this in our environment. It doesn't fit within the security policy. We're not going to be able to purchase the application, right? And he said that. Maybe not in so many words, but that was definitely known on our side. And so the discussion went all the way to the VP of Development, who said, okay, here's what we can do, right? And we agreed to that. And the sale went through, so sales was happy, and the customer was happy. We made a code change to allow them to do what they need to do to fit within that security policy. It's not something that's widely published, right? It's like those undocumented trace flags, kind of, right? But it's an option. And if he hadn't stood up for that, it definitely would not have changed.
Yeah. And if the sale had already closed, maybe it wouldn't have.
And if the sale had already closed, yeah, I don't know that it wouldn't have. I mean, so again, use that power for good, not evil. And I know that DBAs are busy, but if you can get yourself into that process early enough, there's a lot you can do. Meryl.
The other problem is the triangle effect. I think that this might was suggesting where often we're the bad guy in our own organization.
Yeah.
Because we're the obstacle to the business unit getting your product.
Right.
They like it, and we're just making a bunch of noise.
Yeah.
And-
We're seen as blockers.
Right.
Yeah.
So my question, so Meryl's point is that DBAs can be the bad guy, right? Because you're blocking something. And so, I guess my question back to you is, who understands at your organization what you're trying to do, what your role really is? Who is that? Your manager, right? At some point, that goes up to, I believe, a level that's equivalent to the business side.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe going this way, right, directly to the business isn't working for you, right? Find an alternate route, right? This road is closed. Go this way. Right, go up your chain nicely. Explain to them why are you chuckling? He's chuckling over here.
We both work for the same people.
Ah, okay.
But and communicating, at our level, at our peon level, communicating sometimes can help, right? So starting off, this isn't for vendors. I mean, this is any relationship we're in, right? Maybe cut ties, kowtow don't fit into all relationships, but communicating, collaborating, and compromising. I mean, so maybe explain to them very clearly, this is why this is a problem. This is why I'm worrying about this. I really want this application in as well. I understand it's going to make your life easier, and I just want to see this one thing change, because I think that if we just put it in like this, that you're going to have a miserable life in 6 months when it breaks, and we can't support it, and now you're going to be waiting on a 4-person DBA team that's trying to fix all these other problems, and you're going to have to wait and wait and wait, and it's going to be worse for you in the long run. Kind of explain the story and extrapolate it out. I'm sure I know you probably tried, and maybe it doesn't work, but try and communicate, try and communicate it first, and go up the chain. There's nothing wrong going up the chain.
Nicely.
I did that a lot. One of our vendor, right after I start trying to, they're about to close the sale for like the 3rd license or something, and we're having issues with the load. It took me like a week to look at it. We do not need the second, we can consolidate.
Yep.
And their sales engineer is not happy, because I start, like you said, I start questioning.
We get paid on commission.
And he said, well, we can't do that. And I said, exactly, well, we can't purchase it. And they push it up the chain, I push it up my chain, and it happened.
It's kind of like buying a car.
It's you can do it in a nice way. You really can, I think.
But how you communicate.
It's exactly about how you communicate.
Exactly.
Right.
And
being angry and ranting is.
Some people try it doesn't work.
Yeah, it does. I've tried it a lot.
It really works.
Believe me.
It might get you a free night in a hotel, and that's probably the only thing it'll work on is hotels. Cut ties, that's pretty drastic. And if you're involved before the sale, and this vendor is, you see the writing on the wall, and if we go with this vendor, we're going to have all these problems, we're going to have all these things broken, we're going to be restoring the database every week, and the performance is going to go down the tube. Tell somebody, this is a bad app. Do some research yourself. Even though that's not our job to buy applications, but we can do some research to say, here's 4 other vendors, and here's some good things about those vendors. Let's talk to those guys too. Sometimes you have to cut ties. I don't think it comes to that much. And sometimes, I put kowtow. What I mean is, you have to ask yourself which hill you want to die on, right? If you're the DBA and you really are that paranoid control freak, I'm the data advocate, I'm the protector of all data in my environment, and you're knighted in the eternal order of data protectors, and this application is not doing what you expect it to do. You tell them to fix it, they won't fix it. Your company says we have to do it. Your manager says we have to do it. His manager says or her manager says we have to do it. You can quit, or you can document your concerns and move on. If you want to quit, then quit, and if you want to document concerns and move on, do that. So, sometimes we have to do that, but I think it doesn't ever have to come to that. I mean, if you communicate well and properly, and you collaborate on it, and you compromise, I think you're fine. Eric?
Is Is it perfectly acceptable to get a written statement from your vendor that says we are forcing you to do this?
They would never use the word forcing, probably. But I believe that it is valid to request from the vendor that what the requirement is, right? So, if I'm and we'll talk about documentation, but those should all be documented. So you should absolutely have that in advance. I think that's a fair question.
Especially if you're in the audible industry and you need to have proof of why this little piece is varying a little bit. Here's your document. The vendor made me do it. So, who's responsible for what? I just want you to give us secure applications that work, Erin, and document your concerns. That's all I want, right? That's what
You're
you
not
want from
asking
vendors?
for too much. No,
right.
I don't think you're asking for too much. As long as you're securing the environment.
I will definitely secure the
know.
environment.
I know you will.
And ask questions, right? But
Ask questions. Yep.
so,
Okay.
Speaking of, I'm gonna. This is hers now because
Right.
she's gonna yell at us for a little bit. I'm gonna sit down and share while she.
Right. So
She
we
yelled
all
at
know
us.
the joke about documentation, right? And how many of you have read documentation from your vendors?
Can you read?
Read.
Like
read it, not just skimmed it,
All right.
right?
Well,
Not just opened
depends.
it. Okay.
Just look at the part you want.
Right. Just look for the part you want. That's interesting. Where do they talk about security, right? So what I found is if I create it, nobody reads it in general, right? And if I don't have it on one particular thing, that's exactly what everybody starts asking me for. So we're pretty proactive in terms of documentation. What's interesting is that it doesn't always matter in my world. Yes?
It's called the write-only document.
It's called a write-only document?
I like that. Somebody could
That
tweet
is a new one. That's a good one. So I often get involved in the installation process because DBAs do have questions about things. And I'm happy to get that. So I'll get a call from an SE or a call from a project manager, and it's usually really important because the project has come to a stop because they can't install the database until these questions are answered, right? So it's urgent. So I'm like, yes, we can do 30, 60-minute call. That's fine. Let me know what questions they have. I don't hear anything back, right? So there's questions, and it's halting the installation, but nobody gives them to me. So they send me a meeting invite, and I agree, and I send another email. Let me know what the questions are before we get on the call. I just like to be prepared. No response. So I get on the call, and we start, and I get introduced to the DBA, and there's usually like 7 other people on the call related to the project, right? Not technical people, business people. So it's really just a conversation between me and the DBA with other people listening in. First question. So what version of SQL Server do you support? So I answer that. I'm like, what version are you installing? I go through. Okay. Do I need to have Enterprise or Standard Edition? Well, it doesn't matter. I go through that. A couple more questions like that. And I'm like, so just to be clear, have you seen a copy of our documentation? What do you think my answer is? No. And then somebody else in the call goes, oh, yeah, we got that. And because somebody from my end, my project manager said, no, we provided that because we've drilled it into our project managers, into our SEs. So you need to be providing this documentation.
We're busy.
So somebody
really,
says,
really
oh,
busy.
we have it. And then they're like, and then I said, well, how about you review that documentation? And then if you've got questions after that, we'll get on another call. Because I don't want to waste anybody else's time. Right? So very common in my world. So I can ask for that documentation, and when you get it, please review it. Right? I can't tell you how many hours of time we actually do put into our documentation. Hopefully it's good. If it's not, I think it's fair, again, to ask for better documentation.
Out of curiosity, how many people in here do truly read the documentation you get from vendors when you get it? How much of that? So I don't mean the product guide, the user guide. I mean like the installation guides and the IT friendly documents. How much of that is useful?
I read the section that's titled DBA.
Yeah.
Installs library install.
Yeah. Does that answer? Raise your hand if it answers all your questions. Typically. Yeah. I see that in a lot
When
of
you
cases.
say the quality is poor, what do you mean? Like, can you give me a specific example?
It doesn't have what you need to know.
Like what?
Like
Why I
the
need to
security-
install this essay.
The security information.
Okay.
What is the vendor expecting to run?
So how often are you asking those questions again?
Back to the vendor
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
I try to. It's usually kind of pushing on the work.
So do you have a standard like email?
No.
No. But I'm saying you should, right? The questions that come up, right? Build that list.
I have had battles back and forth with them because I'll ask them questions like that. And your documents are all your SSA documents. So have you read the SSA document? Yes. When it gets down to the configuration
depending on your requirements.
Uh-huh.
I said, so what are the requirements?
Mm-hmm.
Did you read the SSA document?
The loop.
They can't give me specifics. Everything is very general in their documentation.
For configuring, right? For configuration?
For configuration, what does it require? What it, they have their standard, which is sort of like a very small installation.
Right.
Here you require this. We'll use SQL standard. We'll this. But when you get beyond 100 users,
Mm-hmm.
now you need the big one. Now we have to. It's all going to be per your requirement.
So then I would say, can you give me a list of about 5 customers that are comparable? I think it's very if they can't answer that question, then I think you can say, I want to talk to somebody else. I want to, if nobody in your organization, that's fine, right? You don't have to be critical of that. Nobody can answer that. Give me some customer references. Let me talk to their DBAs, right? And hopefully, as a vendor, like I've tried to build up relationships with certain DBAs that are willing to do that, right? And there's a benefit to that, by the way. There's a benefit to getting to know your vendor. Normally the procedure is the DBA, if there's problems related to the database, they go through support comes to us. Some of that stuff can get handled by support reps. We've tried to educate them as well. There are certain DBAs that have a direct line to me, right? Because I've developed that relationship with them. I'm happy to have that discussion with them. And in fact, we'll go one step further and I'll say, I want to try a new index, right? But I need data. I need a real system. I can't create that on my crappy laptop. So can I use your environment, right? And I have DBAs that do that. There's another question. No? Yes.
The best?
Oh, it was great.
Oh, good.
Reading through it, my first step was to install SQL 2000.
Oh, that was sarcasm. Install SQL 2000. So yeah.
Wow, that's a bummer.
One more.
Well, I just was on your story you were talking about getting on that call. For you, one of the things you should do is make sure that you provided that documentation to the customer. But a lot of times, I've been on the other end of that call and go through those questions, and they'll say, have you read the documentation? And somebody on our side will say, oh, yeah, we should have forwarded that to you.
Right, and that's just a common breakdown right within the thing. I do. When I reply, I'll be like, yes, have we provided the documentation? And in fact, the PMs have gotten so good now that they'll say, they have questions, we provide the documentation. So I need to go one step further and say, do you know that the documentation's gone to the DBA?
Yeah.
Valid point.
That goes back to that communication thing. We need to do it internally. Yep.
Yeah. Roy, did you have one?
Yeah, there are cases where a vendor would say, okay, if you can't give us direct access to the database, just open a 480. We'll put an application there so that we can debug. I mean, that's kind of like saying, kill me.
Well, especially in your industry, where you get credit card, not companies, but people's credit card data and personal data. Yeah.
Now, okay, so your point is that you don't want to give them that kind of a line into the system. I definitely agree with that. It does include in our license agreement, in our maintenance agreement, that we need to be able to access their system in some way, shape, or form. So we use GoToMeeting, whatever method. And the reason is because there are times when data needs to get fixed, right? When there's been a problem, whoever's fault, it doesn't really matter, where I have to change data. And I don't know that I'm going to have you doing the inserts and the deletes, right? So I may need to connect to your environment, but it's a valid reason.
It's on a planned basis. Everybody knows that you're doing it.
Yes, it is. Absolutely, it's on a planned basis. Unless you're down. No, I don't have direct access to any customer's database, nor do I want that.
Yeah.
One of the other issues that I ran into, this happened recently, and I asked about it on Twitter, is we had a customer that had created a database with a particular collation, and then that database got moved to another instance, and there was a standard collation required for that instance, so they went and changed it. Just went and changed it out of nowhere. Not so well. That didn't work out so well. They had to engage our group to fix it, right? So we had to create a whole new database and move all that data over. Now, admittedly, I didn't have that documented as something that you should not do. But is that a common thing that happens? That they change the collation on the fly in an existing database?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
On the fly?
So I don't. Yeah.
Databases across servers.
Yeah.
Moving it from, let's say, the East Coast to the UK.
They were in the UK. Yeah, I've written that up now.
You know what I do? If I had to do that, I probably call it. I look at all the databases that are on that instance, and I say, hey, I'm going from different collation. Is that going to be okay with you guys? And
right.
I'm
I would
going
have
to
been
expect
happy
a lot
to talk
of
to
no's.
them, right? That would have avoided, $6,000 that they had to pay or whatever.
part of, I think, the DBA responsibility too, to
Yeah.
drastically approach that. You know, like if you're going to change something at the server level, do your due diligence.
Right.
And kind of,
I would agree. All right. So ideally, we should be creating, right, as a vendor, we should be creating this documentation, and hopefully DBAs are taking time to read it. Last topic that we want to cover is maintenance. And just to make sure we're on the same page, and I'm talking about maintenance, right? Anything to maintain the health of the database, anything that you're doing to protect and defend that environment. So backups, integrity checks, and optimizations. You guys want an environment that's recoverable, that performs well. I want that same thing. If you follow me on Twitter, you know that I have worked with several customers who have lost significant data. I worked with a customer who lost 2 years of data. I worked with a customer who lost their entire database. So I take this very seriously.
It wasn't her.
No.
It wasn't.
No. So the issues that I've run into a lot, and I'm going to guess, and if I've missed some, let me know, is that there are vendors that don't make recommendations. Is that true about maintenance?
Very.
Yes. Okay. There are DBAs that ignore the recommendations, meaning they don't do anything in some cases, right? I've connected to environments where statistics haven't been updated in 7 years, honestly. I've connected to environments where they have no idea what a rebuild is. Or there are DBAs who are kind of stuck in the CYA mode where they're not going to do anything on their own. They're going to follow exactly what needs to be done, even if it affects their environment or isn't the right thing for their environment. For example, in our documentation, it's very general, right? We have 10,000 customers. So it's really hard for me to know what everybody's solution looks like and to make a recommendation specific to them. And I say that, right? The beginning of our documentation says that. Your mileage, it's going to change for you. It's going to be different, right? So I say you need to back up the database at least once a day, right? Tell me that you're in simple recovery and you're doing a full backup once a day, at a minimum. There might be companies who can't afford to lose that much data, right? So they should be doing something else. But the DBA might come back and say, well, this is what you told me to do. And again, it's a recommendation. And then I have the involuntary DBAs. And this is a part for me that's really challenging, but it's also kind of fun, especially for those involuntary DBAs who find that they really like working with SQL Server, right? Because they don't have any idea what an index rebuild is. And they don't understand that if they're running standard edition, that means that system, is going to have limited availability while those indexes are rebuilding. They don't understand about column statistics. They don't understand that those aren't going to get updated when the index gets rebuilt. And they don't understand that if they're a 24/7 shop, when they get to be a 200 or 300 gig database, they're going to have to do something different. Right? So those kinds of discussions, they can be very challenging when you're not really truly a DBA. So I talked about a couple examples, and Mike mentioned the point of adding indexes to the database. So have any of you run into issues where you've tried to do that, where you've found, okay, and so what happened? Did you just do it on your own?
We're generally, depending on the database. I've had it happen from the vendor where they say, oh yeah, that's great, you can do whatever you want, and I've had others that say, we won't support the product if you customize, you add indexes, or if you find one that's not being used,
If you
takes
drop
50 gig, and you decide you want to drop it. We're not going to support your software.
Okay. So do you add the indexes anyway? No. Do you try to push that through as like an enhancement to them?
Well,
if you don't, I want to know why.
There's a long story behind that.
Okay.
Basically, our company helped fund a software company with a bunch of other companies, and then sort of left them by the wayside because they weren't really delivering what we wanted. So the relationship there has really deteriorated.
A little bit of a challenge.
So they're not looking to help us upgrade from SQL 2000 to anything.
I just add the indexes then.
Well, right. Doesn't look like being much support anyway. So.
Yeah.
I always use kind of a judgment call. I'll write up what I found and send it to them. And then when I get the response back, evaluate what's the tone of that. And does it seem like the person knows what they're talking about? Honestly.
No, I think that's valid.
And then it's a judgment call, right? There are some I won't ever touch. SharePoint, I'm not going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
SharePoint's an exception.
I'm like, I know this vendor is not very sophisticated. It's going to take me 6 months to convince them to make this index. The risk is small. I'm doing it.
And then you document that in your own environment in some way, shape, or
I
form?
do the same. It's an independent
Right.
Usually what I did, I communicated first, and I tried, and they says, no, we can't do that, and I tried to get a background on it, like, why? I mean, this makes sense, and, I tried to find a person that kind of sort of know what they're talking about. And if they keep saying, no, we can't support you in that, then I look at the risk. It's something that can I implement myself and document it, and so when we're upgrading or not. Like for an index, I can pull it out before the upgrade.
Right.
But it's a needed event for us.
Has anybody ever run into the issue where you've actually been cut off from the vendor?
Cut off?
Meaning you violated the maintenance agreement and they said you were done and that was it?
No, they like their support money.
Right. See that now, and again, I probably shouldn't say that, right? But we have a database use policy, right? We have a written document that says here's what you can do. You can select against the database all you want. You can't do inserts, update, delete. You can create a custom table in the database, right? A separate one. We recommend doing it this way. And when it comes to indexes, I'm happy to hear your suggestion, right? I'm happy for you to say, here's what we're doing. We're either running a custom report that we're writing, or we think you're missing this index, right? I take that every time. I usually have a call, again, here's what you're going to add. What does the volume of that table look like? Try to understand that. And then we document on our side. But there have been times where customers have done things that are beyond what they're supposed to do, and I will tell you that we are still supporting them.
Why we got kicked out was because we have been pestering them because we saw lots of performance issues, missing indexes, there were lots of things, raw sequels coming all over the place, everything. It was a total mess. So we said, okay, this can't be done. We have to take care of it. Either you let us play around with it, or you fix it. Said we can't fix it. It will come after 2 years. No, that ain't going. So we had our own development team get in, create an application that mimicked it first, and then changed everything and took them out.
And you were done.
Yeah.
But that was a purposeful.
Yes.
Purposeful.
Yes.
Okay.
We gave them warning. It was
no.
not like we just jumped in and did something. We gave them warning, talked to them.
Yep. For optimism, so go ahead.
The worst part was their maintenance. They said that they've got our own backup solution. Their backup solution was taking XML down.
It was doing what?
XML down.
XML sounds easy.
All right. The only thing I want to say is the optimizations. And again, I've heard stories. What's the story about where you can't do a rebuild, right? Or a rebuild is not supported? Has anybody ever heard that?
From vendors?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why they don't, but I've heard that from people. I haven't had it, but.
And I would say rebuild anyway.
Yeah.
Again, I have a general recommendation that I make. But I love it. I had a customer that called me a week ago, and it was a great conversation. She was a new DBA, and she wanted to use Ola Hologren script and wanted to know if that was okay, which absolutely. So, a vendor should provide that general set of recommendations. And as a DBA, right, if you're deviating from a requirement maybe, or if you're not confident in what you should do, which I think most people here probably feel pretty good about a maintenance strategy and developing that themselves, it's fair to call the vendor and say, hey, I want you to review this strategy with me. Now, there's a gray line there, right? If you want to start talking about your backups and you're going to talk about your HA and DR strategy, I'll give you about 15, 30 minutes. But then beyond that, then we're really talking about, a consulting service where we're going to come in and it's bigger than just the database. Right. But for maintenance, for stats, and for rebuilds, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. So in the end, we threw this slide in here because we mentioned this a lot, right? But it's really about communication, I think. You have a lot of power, right? And communicating is really powerful. And, we talk about writing the email and all of that, but a phone call goes a long way. And I don't know how easy it is sometimes for you to get on the phone with your vendor, but I think it's something that you can request, right? Because you can get the positive and the negative across too easily, or something can come across positively or negatively too easily, I think, in email. So get on the phone with them. Try not to let pride get in the way, and I think that works both ways. I feel like I've worked with a lot of customers and I've seen a lot of things, but I haven't seen everything. And I know that. And so our joke is,
can we all just get along?
And this is when we go for a group hug.
We'll do that later. We'll do that after when we close.
Yeah, if you want a group hug later.
So a set of questions you can hug.
Right.
There's a vendor in the audience to hug, too. So.
Right, exactly. I don't know, Jerry, we didn't clear that with Jerry.
Is it okay,
so.
Jerry, if they hug you?
If you want to hug, you can come here. All right. So again, these were kind of our goals. Hopefully we've gotten there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any, where are we for time?
About 5 minutes.
I don't know if there's any other points or any other questions that we didn't answer that you guys want to bring up. Any other ideas? Yes?
I think this is great. I mean, one thing that I would add is, like, I found myself in a situation. I saw this presentation years ago. It was called Why Ask Why. Someone comes to you and say, you know, what's the best way to do this? Or even, you know, I need to do this. And I found myself in a situation saying, why? Why do you need to do that? Not that you can't do that, but I need you to tell me what you're really trying to do. Because often the perceived problem is different than the actual problem, right? And the perceived solution is different than the actual solution. And I think it cuts both ways. Like, you know, if you want to do something, explain why you want to do it. And we have a policy. I'm happy to explain to you what the policy is as opposed to just, no, you can't do that.
That's great.
Yes.
From most of my interactions with vendors, I tend to find that most of their stuff, their documentation, their interactions are built more for shops that don't really have a DBA. Like they seem to be written to that level of specification, whether that's not going into a ton of detail or actually going to the extent to specifically not say stuff, like have things built in for their own maintenance, have things built in for.
That's interesting.
Yep.
That's interesting because we've had people who've suggested that we do that, right? And so it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you as a DBA how to do your job. I don't. But I want you to succeed, and I want to give you the information. So I have to find a middle ground that's going to hit the sophisticated, smart DBA and also the involuntary DBA who has no clue, right? So I think in that case, try to remember that, right? They don't know what their audience is, right? They're trying to hopefully at least reach, the ones who need the most help, And then if you have questions, again, where's that list, right? Merrill's got a list of questions, whether he's asking it every time. That's in a Word document. That's somewhere that you're going through every time. And again, Mike's got it started. I have it started on my side.
So.
Share a story like that, just because
Sure.
it made me laugh out loud. Like, yeah, we just did a migration, and so the vendor came in and helped us out, SE and everything, and their installer put maintenance jobs on the server, which is okay, but I always go and review them
Right.
very carefully.
As a good DBA should.
It's the classic, index, rebuild, then shrink.
Oh,
Nightly,
yeah.
baked into this thing.
Right.
It's pretty common.
I was just laughing. I just went disable because we have all our own stuff. But it did make me cringe about all their other customers.
Okay, so then did you go and did you say, hey?
I did.
You did.
I said,
That's what I love.
I wrote an email to the SE and I said, I know this isn't your problem, but please tell whoever you need to tell that this is really not.
Right, and that's what I love. And I have no problem hearing that back from a DBA at any time. Hey, why are you doing this or this isn't whatever. Now, again, I've done my very best to align everything with standard best practices. And I reference Paul Randall, Kimberly Tripp, Ad Mechanic, who I have customers install who is active, proactively, right? So I'm trying to do that, and, if you can help them, I think that's great.
But you're one of the good vendors.
I like to think so, so thank you. And you all are the good DBAs.
She's the exception, I think, to some of the rules we were talking about. So in the last minute here, this book, by the way, it's all the proceeds donate. You guys probably heard about this many times, but all the proceeds go to Operation Smile. So it's at the bookstore here. You can buy it online as well. We had a lot of good interactions. So
we did.
My thought process is let's give it to the one vendor in the audience.
Aww.
So does that make sense?
If you want to give it to a DBA, you should feel free.
You can give it to somebody else. That's fine. Give it to your development team.
If you all can do your evaluations, that'd be awesome.
And you guys heard the announcement about Hadoop and SQL and all the data processing this morning. They're doing a new thing this year. They're basically scanning all of the feedback. Any ones with negative comments get discarded. It's a new thing.
No. Feedback is helpful. So please fill those out.
No, I'm joking. It is helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.